So, moving forward, we're going to talk about matching up the sponsor requirements in the funding solicitations with appropriate elements in your mock project, as you work through the course. But I'm also going to keep using that NSF Graduate Research Fellowship Program from Module 3 video as my example. If you're writing a proposal for yourself or for a faculty member as part of working through this course, let me say that once you've finished this module and have your matched up outline pieces, you should start writing too. One thing this course will not be talking about is how to write a paragraph in your own scientific discipline. You already know much more about that than I do. So, move forward in your text writing along with following the grant strategies in the course. Okay, you want to hear about those grant strategies now, of course. So, last time, we identified 3 types of important things in reading through the solicitation: funder priorities, compliance requirements, and structural elements. We're starting with the funder priorities because those are the things that should be guiding your selection of the solicitation. You need to have picked your solicitation for sure by the start of Module 6. In Modules 1 to 3, you are supposed to be moving back and forth with your project, your solicitation, and your thoughts. That's the normal way to start this exploration. But this is the last module where you're supposed to be actively tweaking those things. You want to be pretty sure of your project and solicitation by the end of this week's discussion on how the two line up, and confident on how you can start addressing that lineup, that alignment. If they don't line up well for you, then you need to go back and search solicitations and/or change your mock project. You want to feel by the end of this module that you have a strong, good linkage in concept between the project and the solicitation, and that you can write about that linkage. The next module will talk about the strategic use of literature to prove your points and those linkages. And maybe, just maybe, you could change your project because of the literature strategy. But once you hit Module 6, then I'm going to assume you're solid on your project and solicitation both. So, that's the deadline for those 2 things. Think hard about that matchup and be absolutely comfortable with this lesson's discussion on that alignment. This is possibly the most analytical, thinking-intensive part of the process, this matching part of your project and the sponsor's goals and priorities, and describing that match. In one sense, it's simple. Take each goal or priority, find something about your project that fulfills it, explain how it fulfills it. But because we're not mind readers, it's hard to know what the sponsor is thinking when they write their solicitation. And it's tempting to skimp and say, maybe this is what they mean, when we aren't too sure. Most of you are working in quantitative fields where we set clear thresholds for numbers. Sensor picks up so many parts per million, it's working. Doesn't pick that up, not working, even if it's sort of responding. Gotta go back and fix it. So we want the same kind of clear guidelines from sponsors, right? But unfortunately, we don't get them. And there are good reasons for that, because the sponsors don't want to exclude projects with too much exactness. But that means they have to leave some room for vagueness and interpretation, which can make applicants feel unsure and unsettled. You've heard so much about sponsors and their strategic plans, their priorities, and the solicitation goals and priorities, and the areas of focus, that you're probably wondering why we repeat this so much. Here's why. Grant review and winning is based on those priorities and focuses. Remember that grants are a competitive process, and the peer merit review of the grant applications controls who wins the competition. Those reviewers' ratings and responses are based on the solicitation needs and goals mixed with the sponsor's priority areas and rating system. So, winning the grant is based entirely on proving that you fulfill all of those things. Your project must respond to all of those areas effectively and clearly if you want to be the one who gets the money. That's why we talk about this so much. Each solicitation and each project is different. Each needs its own unique analysis. That's why I've said before that grant success relies on critical thinking and analysis. I'm going to explain some examples from that NSF Graduate Research Fellowship Program grant that I analyzed in the last mini lecture video. So all of the example goals and so on that I'm about to address come from there. A really important part usually shows up in the introduction section. It's nice and clear here. The program goals are 1. To select, recognize, and financially support individuals early in their career with the demonstrated potential to be high-achieving scientists and engineers, and 2. To broaden participation in science and engineering of underrepresented groups, including women, minorities, persons with disabilities, and veterans. So let's look at those 1 and 2. The first part, to select, recognize, and financially support individuals, that's obviously on them and what they plan to do, but it gives you the cue to see that it's about to tell you what you need to prove about yourself to get that selection, recognition, and financial support. They then say 3 key traits that you need to prove early in their careers, with demonstrated potential to be high-achieving scientists and engineers. So early in your career, you can show by talking about where you are in your academics. Demonstrated potential, you need to discuss what demonstrates your potential. Have you done special projects, gotten high grades, maybe promising work experiences, or maybe recommendations from a faculty member could be highlighted here. Whatever you decide to put in the application, this demonstrating your potential is one thing that you would have to prove. In a more project-oriented grant, same deal. They give a goal, and you write sentences to prove the project will meet that goal. It's a formula, a matching formula, and you have to follow the formula. Okay, so the next item is high achieving. They're okay with it being potential to be high achieving if you can demonstrate it. How can you show you'll be high achieving? Discuss your aspirations and career plans. What classes have you taken, and how they specifically will lead to a great future. Show your thoughts and planning about this fellowship project and your career and the trajectory it's taking you on. You're studying some innovative stuff in this PSM program. Talk that up, and no fluff. They read a zillion of these things, so they will know if you're covering uncertainty with vagueness. Be clear, be concise. If you don't have a career plan, it's time to make one that includes the role of this fellowship project in moving you to be a high-achieving engineer or scientist. The next part is to broaden participation in science and engineering of underrepresented groups, including women, minorities, persons with disabilities, and veterans. If you are one of those underrepresented groups, say so. Use the wording here so it's clear. But if you're not, but still feel underrepresented in science or technology, you can talk about how your background may be urban or rural, socioeconomic status, your educational background, or whatever you feel is underrepresented about you in science or technology, and how increasing representation from that background will broaden and enrich the field. You don't have to go on and on about it, but do address it if there's any way you can. As I read through the GRFP solicitation, I come to another area that says something important. The application review process section. Now, I hope it's obvious to you that any criteria or goals or guidance that they give about how the application will be reviewed is super, super, super important. Because the review is where they judge the competition and who will get the money. So, under here, we get a good description of the basic idea of NSF review and its procedure. And then it comes at the bottom to 2 bullets that says they will evaluate all proposals against 2 criteria. You can be confident that means they're important. And we get these 2 bullets that you're going to see a lot of: intellectual merit and broader impacts. These are the sponsor's priorities, NSF's priorities. And it'll seem awkward, and it is awkward, but you will want to address both the solicitation's priorities and goals for the funding program and also the sponsor's overarching priorities that you see here. So there are two sets of things telling you what to include in your grant, the solicitation and the sponsor. And they both have priorities, and they can overlap, but they aren't exactly the same when they overlap, and other times they're totally different. Within your page limit, you need to address all of both sets of core issues if you want a competitive grant proposal. In this case, and in many NSF cases, they tell us to include a separate statement on this intellectual merit and the broader impact. So stick that in your outline and make sure it's clearly labeled. And now think, what is the intellectual merit or potential to advance knowledge in your research fellowship? How will the project you do in it make your field better? Is it R&D that will make something innovative? Is it science that will push the envelope and find a great new direction of discovery? Talk about the scientific or technological or research advances this fellowship will allow you to investigate and make. Oh, and back those up with recent references from journals. We'll talk about that more in the next module. Then, broader impacts. How will the project you do benefit society? If you're from an underrepresented group, like Native American cultures, will you individually be balancing the scales of inequality by being one of the few tribal persons in technological innovation, maybe? Will you bring that knowledge back to the area you came from to help extend a culture of innovation? Or maybe you're not yourself part of an underrepresented group whose inclusion is inherently a social good, but you plan to do research that has the potential to benefit society and contribute to the achievement of specific, desirable societal outcomes. Notice that that is the phrasing they use, and you should use the solicitation phrasing whenever you can. So, how will your research benefit society? Promote health or well-being, maybe bring economic development. That's something that a lot of you will be doing in some way. Remember, we talked about the importance of the why factor, how you would explain your research to a random person on the street so they would be impressed and care about the project. That's important here. Okay, so you probably have the idea. Work through the module for more ideas and guidance on how to interpret the priorities and goals, and then describe your project in ways that make the match between their priorities and goals and your project clear. Thanks for listening. This is Nina signing off Mini Lecture 4, Matching the Sponsor's Requirements with Your Project Plan of the UNC Systems Professional Science Master's course on Fundamentals of Grantsmanship. Bye!